Okay, thank you so much for all you that are listening live, and we're recording this today through the Georgia Institute on Aging, the education arm of Leading Age Georgia. And our speaker today that's going to do a series of webinars for us is Catherine Fetch, and she is the owner of Simply Mediation, and she's done a lot of several presentations for us through our institute before, and she's worked with some of our member organizations to help build relationships with residents and the elders that they serve, as well as working with individual team members and staff at our member organizations. So Catherine has an incredible background, professional nursing degrees and experience in an incredible amount of roles in nursing administration, doing all kinds of things from developing efficiencies and work outcomes, quality improvement programs, peer review programs, compliant programs. She has degrees from Georgia Baptist School of Nursing, Valdosta State College, and Emory University. And Catherine, I just want to just personally thank you for what you've done to help our members do a better job in serving their elders, either through housing or clients that they have in community-based service organizations, and also for all the time that you spent in putting this together for us. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, and then we will, at the end, we'll hopefully have a few minutes for some questions.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me, and I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today on the first of our 3 webinars. This one, as you know, is on hoarding. You might be surprised to realize that as we begin, let's see, is this changing the? So I was just trying to change the slide, but it doesn't seem to be changing, Walter.
Okay.
So I should be on the slide.
Sometimes it takes a minute. You either click on the slide or the error.
There we go. It's on there now. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to begin with some content that comes from the nursing world so that I can give you another point of view about bullying and the work environment. This work comes from a person whose name is Diane M. Jacobs. She did a presentation at the 2015 Georgia Nurses Association Professional Development Conference and Membership Assembly. And the name of her talk was Speak Up, Recognizing and Addressing Disruptive Behaviors. Here's what she said. Much has been written and spoken about the current work environment, about incivility in the workplace, about lateral violence, about, in a nutshell, bullying. Within the workplace culture and environment, we can describe this whole issue of workplace violence in terms like workplace incivility, disruptive behavior by nursing staff, physicians, and others, horizontal violence, and bullying targeted to one or more persons. Jacobs describes 10 of the most frequent forms of lateral violence in the nursing practice, and they include nonverbal innuendo, verbal affront, undermining activities, purposefully withholding information, sabotage, infighting, scapegoating, backstabbing, failure to protect privacy, and broken confidences. So you might ask yourself, how in the world do we find ourselves in this situation? Well, for a lot of reasons. Cultural differences, generational differences, tolerance of bad behavior at all levels of the organization, fear of retaliation, individuals who choose not to report these behaviors when they themselves are the focus of the bullying out of fear of what others might think of them. Really, see if I can change this. Yeah. Jacobs further said that when you're able to change your words, you become able to change your world. Put another way, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon wrote, when deeds speak, words are nothing. It's important to remember that. When deeds speak, words are nothing. What that means is that if the deeds associated with the bullying are noted but not addressed, it becomes all too clear that, in fact, in many instances, we really don't reflect in our actions the words used to describe our organizational vision, mission, and expected cultural norms within the organization. So you might be saying, why am I describing the bullying behaviors within nursing? But I think you already know why. I think it already is clear to you because they likely are the very same as the behaviors you may be seeing in your own organizations. Now, this slide will take a few minutes, but I'll go ahead and go on. There are actions that can be taken to stop or eliminate bullying in the workplace. Some of these include, but they're certainly not limited to, becoming more aware of the problem by learning more about the real culture of your organization. And what that means is walking around, understanding how things are going, getting a feel for the organization, getting a sense of how well everyone is interacting with everyone else, whether it be staff or it be clients who are living in that particular place. It means zero tolerance. I want to say it again, zero tolerance for incivility, disruptive behavior, hostile behavior, violence in the workplace, or bullying. If you don't enforce the policies you have in place, then really you don't have any. It means adapting professional behavior standards that are uniformly enforced for everybody, every day, all the time, no matter what. It also means empowering bystanders to speak up and be heard without fear of negative consequences. It means teaching everybody to address bullying or incivility behaviors as they occur. And it means becoming a real leader role model whose words match his or her deeds. If you don't tolerate bullying, neither will anyone else. It's really important that you're always aware of the message that you're sending to others. Bullying is an increasingly common problem among seniors. While the communal living nature of senior living communities can open the door for the formation of cliques and similar social behaviors, even seniors living in their own homes independently can be subject to bullying within their social circles. A March 2012 AARP bulletin noted that between 10 and 12% of older adults living in senior communities are mistreated by their peers, and often the behavior goes unreported. And I'm certain you agree with me when I say that's just an unacceptable percentage. So what does older adult bullying look like? Well, I want to tell you a couple of examples. The first comes from Frances Shanny Parker in a 2011 article at kevinmd.com. And the second comes from Elise November, a social worker. Ms. Parker said, well, now it's going backwards. Let's go back up. Okay.
I'm actually, Catherine, I've been advancing the slides for you. So do you just want to tell me when it's time for the next slide?
Yeah, that'll be perfect. And leave it where it is for right now. I'll tell you when to advance. That's a lot better. Thank you.
You can just say next and I'll go.
Ms. Parker. You're welcome. Ms. Parker said, the first time I witnessed older adults bullying others was at a senior center where, after a great deal of resistance from members, the age for joining had been lowered from 62 to 55 years old. Most local senior centers had already lowered their membership age years before this center. However, several older members were rude to younger members who joined because they simply didn't like the change. Ms. Parker went on to describe older residents saving preferred seats in the dining room for their friends, ensuring that the new young people, quote unquote, were stuck with the less desirable seating and sure to feel isolated. In another event, Ms. November said, I met an elderly couple in an assisted living facility. They told me their story of social rejection. When they went for their first meal at their new place, they walked into the dining room to eat breakfast. They went from table to table to join in with others where there appeared to be an open seating. After multiple rejections, they took their breakfast trays, returned to their room, and never went back to eat in the dining room again. By the time they told me this story, they had spent 2 years eating alone in their room. I don't think that's how any of you would wish for things to be. Okay, if you'll advance, Walter. So I want to define bullying for you. Bullying is an unwanted, aggressive behavior among individuals that involves real or perceived power imbalance. The behavior is repeated or has the potential to be repeated over time. The essential components for bullying behavior to occur include the bully, the victim, a location, which usually has limited supervision, and sometimes one or more bystanders to support the bully. There's always an audience, either at the incident or one or more people the bully can tell about the incident after it's happened. Other examples of bullying include verbal or physical abuse, which may include yelling, pushing, shoving, or hitting. If you'd advance, please. Bully was further defined by Oweus in 2003. He said, bullying is a social relational aggression, also called social bullying, occurs when a person intentionally inflicts or attempts to inflict injury or discomfort on someone else through negative actions or aggressive behaviors with direct words, indirect words to others, making mean faces or gestures, spreading rumors or untruths, or intentionally excluding someone from a social group. Now, to take that further, Dr. Robert Boniface classifies bullying as follows. According to him, verbal bullying is name-calling, teasing, insults, taunts, threats, sarcasm, or pointed jokes targeting specific individuals. Physical bullying is pushing, hitting, destroying property, or stealing behaviors that could result in legal charges against the bully. Socially aggressive means shunning, excluding, gossiping, spreading rumors, and using negative nonverbal body language such as mimicking or offensive gestures. The behaviors don't always have to be repetitive. One-time events can have such a significant negative impact that they have a lasting reaction on the part of the person who was bullied. Attacks from the bullies can be direct and they can be indirect. Direct, the target is aware of the source of the aggression. They know exactly who the bully is. Indirect, a victim may be hurt by gossip, by shunning or isolation, but not know the source of the aggression. If you would advance, Walter. Other bullying behaviors include criticizing or ridiculing another person who does not meet the individual's accepted standards for clothing, social status, religion, sexual orientation, economic background, or virtually any other characteristic or status. Everyone in the environment is impacted by bullying. It's important to note that staff who witness bullying report experiencing negative emotions just as victims do because it makes them feel bad. Just as targets or victims could benefit from bullying prevention and intervention, so too could the bully themselves along with witnesses, including staff. Characteristics of those who are involved with bullying include, but certainly aren't limited to, for the bully, who lacks empathy, stirs up conflict, and has few positive relationships. The victim, who may withdraw socially, be anxious or depressed, have functional changes, or speak of moving out. And for staff, who don't enjoy living in an environment of fear and disrespect, who feel guilty for not intervening. They understand that not intervening encourages increased bullying, it creates insecurity, reduces resident participant satisfaction and participation. If you'll advance. When bullying occurs in seniors, a number of things happen. According to Dr. Linda Rhodes, the former Secretary of Aging and author of The Essential Guide for Caring for Aging Patients, elder bullies, this is an interesting quote, I think, elder bullies might have likely exhibited this behavior during a lifetime, but as they age, factors such as loss of independence, relationships, valued roles, and feeling powerless in a controlled setting can exacerbate the need to exert control and ignite a late life round of bullying behavior, something they perhaps thought was gone. Dr. Rhodes identified some additional forms of bullying that may occur in the senior population, and they include insults or belittling jokes, spreading rumors or whispering when the victim enters a room, invading a victim's personal space, criticizing or ridiculing physical or mental disabilities, and offensive gestures and facial expressions. Advance. So, how do you cope with older adult bullying? I wish I had a magic bullet, a fabulous answer that would solve everything, but truly I don't. The solution is not easy. Bullying is a problem that only gets worse when it's ignored. It's very important to remember that. Bullying is a problem that only gets worse when it is ignored. The victims are vulnerable and often defenseless and often frightened that something even worse can happen to them if they say anything. Some, such as those targeted by sexual orientation, become so frustrated they commit suicide. If you'll advance. Bullying requires a multifaceted approach that combines a lot of things, and these are just but a few of those. The first is a clear expectations and policies with targeted staff training and rapid intervention to reduce the negative impacts bullying often has on victims. I cannot tell you how critical it is to not only have clear expectations, clear written policies and procedures, but even more so to make certain that you know that you and everyone who works with you enforces those policies. And more importantly, to know that not only did you staff do training at orientation, but you did it annually thereafter to keep it in front of everyone and give reminders over the year to again remind them. It's also important when you're doing training that you keep rosters of everyone who was trained so that you know right away if one or two new hires didn't get that training or if someone who was due for their annual training didn't get it. Very important to keep those records. The training has to be done, of course, first at new employee training and annually thereafter as a refresher for all staff and to provide new information about bullying as it evolves. Expectations and policies must be in writing, must be regularly reviewed and updated, and must be present for all to see and or access and must be enforced. It's those last four words, and must be enforced. All of us have been through Joint Commission and other reviews and certifications. All of us trot out policy and procedure manuals that clearly have been updated, are right there for everyone to see. But in fact, if you went out and asked your staff, they often don't have a clue what those policies and procedures are, nor do they really actually remember where they're stored. So it's important that those things are in place. They know what the policies are. They know they're held accountable for them. If expectations and policies are not enforced, they have no weight. If expectations and policies are not enforced, they have no weight, and thus no impact on stopping bullying behavior. And what that means in simple terms is you may have written it down. You may have it in a pretty binder. It may be on a shelf where everyone can see it. But if it's not enforced, it's as if you did none of that work and none of that paper exists. If you'll advance. There are specific suggestions for stopping bullying. Among them are, first, setting clear expectations and boundaries within the community that makes residents and staff aware of the community's commitment to a respectful environment. That means for everybody there are rules, and everybody has to follow those rules. Staff at all levels must continuously demonstrate through their own behavior and response to reported bullying their adherence to expectations and boundaries of conduct. Have ongoing discussions among staff, residents, and families, as well as formal needs assessments to identify potential problems early. Evaluate and implement changes that can decrease the power of bullies. For example, if residents are being isolated in a dining room, for instance, eliminate reserved seating. When there's no reserved seating, anybody can sit anywhere and enforce that. Advance. Implement clear and easy reporting processes to encourage victims to report bullying and implement a no-tolerance policy for bullying in your community. Include a standard process for resolving bullying incidents once discovered, such as mediation and other tactics. Make certain clear consequences for continuing bullying are in place, known by the staff and residents alike, and enforced when necessary to do so. I said this before, but I just have to say it one more time as a note. A no-tolerance policy for bullying is of absolutely no value if it isn't followed every day by everyone all the time, from the most senior person to the newest person, from the longest person who's been in residence to the newest one. Dr. Rhodes advises family members to take action if they suspect their loved ones are being bullied in a senior living community. For example, if the problem is stemming from issues with seating arrangements in the dining room, have them consider joining their loved one for a meal to assess the situation. Have them talk with administration to find out what policies are in place and make them aware of incidents as soon as you know about them. If you'll advance. Coping with older adult bullying in senior living communities is possible, and here are some ways that you can do that. First, help seniors understand there are steps they can take to better cope with bullying. Ignore the behavior in order to remove the bully's perceived power. This is what the senior can do to someone who is trying to bully them. When you ignore the behavior, you really do take away their power. Share your opinion without being aggressive or having any implied hostility, but have a part in the conversation. Avoid interrupting or provoking bullies. Maintain eye contact with bullies, and you might ask why. It's because when you maintain eye contact with someone, it makes them uncomfortable and makes them step back, not forward. And try to understand the bully's position or circumstances that may be contributing to these behaviors. There are incidences of bullying in other age demographics, and like those, coping with senior bullying is a long and sometimes complex process. Identifying coping strategies to help seniors cope with bullying and fostering appropriate behaviors and responses among senior bullies is the best approach. But it takes ongoing effort and careful consideration to resolve situations in a positive way. In senior living communities, setting expectations and providing clear rules and policies from the start helps to ensure a positive living environment for all residents. I'd like, if you'll advance, please, Walter. I want to tell you about an innovative program that was called Bullying at Any Age Hurts. It was put together by Professional Affordable Housing Management Association, or PAHMA, P-A-H-M-A, that serves Western Pennsylvania. They adopted this program in October of 2013 to 2014, their fiscal year, and they joined the fight against bullying in all of its communities and began their outreach program for 2013-2014. Their goal, bully-free zones in all of their communities. As they began their work, they explored the problem of bullying in a residential setting, including both family and elderly affordable housing. Housing site staff at the conference learned that bullying is equally present in elderly housing as it is in family or general occupancy properties. I'd like to say that again. Housing site staff at the conference learned that bullying is equally present in elderly housing as it is in family or general occupancy properties. They described bullying in their settings as being verbal or nonverbal and including physical bullying, harm to someone's body, emotional bullying, harm to someone's self-esteem or feeling of safety, and social bullying, as well as harm to someone's group acceptance. If you'll advance. They found that the bullying behavior can range from actions such as name-calling or gossiping to actions that are against the law, such as arson or assault with a weapon. Bullying is a learned behavior, and there are rewards in the situation for a bully. We learned to stop bullying in our housing communities by looking at ways to remove those rewards. And by not tolerating bullying as an acceptable practice in our housing communities, they said, and taking actions to eliminate it, we can make our housing communities, both elderly and family, a better place to live for all of our residents. And if you'll advance, Walter. So they came up with SOAR with PAHMA. The first step was to ask their members and their staff to SOAR with PAHMA, and they developed a PAHMA pledge, 2013. Pledge was, I will not use bullying behavior. It says, I will speak up if I see bullying. I will offer a hand to those I see bullied. I will acknowledge that we are all different. I will raise awareness and to help eliminate bullying. I will respect our home and our neighbors. SOARR, or SOAR with PAHMA. The majority of their members and staff at this session signed the pledge board and received a certificate about not using bullying behavior and SOAR, thus taking positive action against bullying. As they said, it's our home, not a bully zone, and these were their next steps. They will develop a sample policy that can be used by our members at their properties to address the bullying problem. This will include that bullying is unacceptable on the part of either staff or residents of the community. This policy can be further added to the house rules of the community, used to further define behaviors that prevent the quiet and peaceful enjoyment of the housing by our residents. We see violations of the policy by one or more residents as actions that could result in evictions for cause. For any housing staff involved in bullying, it could result in disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment. And when you add consequences like these, then you really put meat in what it is you're trying to do. If you'll advance. The policy, when finalized and distributed, will encourage residents and staff to follow policy guidelines, report incidents, trust confidentiality, utilize a support system, participate in support groups, and most importantly, ask for help. Now, I'd like to share something with you. It's called A Call to Action by Catherine Parker Cardinal. And in the back of this PowerPoint presentation, you'll see all of the references that I've used, and hopefully that will help you. But this call for action, I think, is very compelling, and so I wanted to share it with you. Call to action. Now is the time for accountability in programming and policy, which fosters civility and social wellness in aging services. All stakeholders in the aging services industry, including CEOs, administrators of nursing homes, and owners of assisted living and memory care organizations and others must make note of reforms that are needed industry-wide. Movements toward accountability are in the infancy stages, but over time, it is inevitable that consumers will demand progress, and likely that CMS will require staff training and/or policies designed to improve staff responses with regard to social bullying. Dignity models such as Greenhouse Projects, the Eden Alternative, and Wellspring model, part of the Pioneer Network, which places focus on resident-directed care, appear to have actually lowered incidents of bullying. Studies that look at this link could lead to important discoveries in terms of what supports social wellness in senior housing. State ombudsman offices should have access to the latest research and findings on social bullying in senior housing and be responsive to those who inquire about the topic. Administrators and management in positions of authority, use your influence in ways that maintain the dignity of those below you. The most respected leaders are successful at doing this. Become aware of ways you have contributed to the problem. Strong leaders are capable of reflecting on their own personal style and are often open to feedback. Surround yourself with others who can provide supportive suggestions for how you may grow as a leader. Leaders in the aging services community must look at this problem regardless of perceived challenges to marketing and public relations departments. Managers, even if you're not seeing bullying in your senior community, assume that it's there somewhere. Start with a listening campaign. Do not use spy technology to identify or prevent social aggression or bullying in your organization. While it may help you detect bullying, technology does nothing in terms of prevention or intervention and can be misused for these purposes. Use of technology for safety and security is far different ethically than utilizing technology to incriminate people in social conflict, where it then becomes part of the problem as an unfair use of big brother power over subordinates. Put funds and time into comprehensive, not merely reactive or legally protective, continuous programming that becomes embedded into the culture as part of cultural competency. Be careful not to label every socially aggressive act as bullying. Consult with professionals to accurately identify repeated, intentional patterns of aggression. Some, as Dr. Boniface reminds us, use raised voices, gestures, and facial expressions when simply communicating feelings and emotions. This is very different from bullying. Don't be caught up in appearance or company mottos like, "We're welcoming here," "We don't have that kind of problem here." Listen to direct care workers and their direct supervisors. Revise the narrative to, "We see bullying as a lifelong problem that every place struggles with. We need you and everyone associated with our organization to model how to treat others with dignity. Will you be part of our solution team?" Impressive decor and upper-class residents do not always translate into an environment that receives gold stars for cultural norms of dignity and respect. Relationships and interactions in the environment are better indicators. Some environmental factors, however, seem to promote a healthier emotional atmosphere. In other words, environmental factors do influence how people feel and contribute to conflict or peace. Various conditions such as overcrowding or neglected property could contribute to problems. Make efforts to have environments reflect the message that you matter to elderly residents. Meet with other like-minded colleagues and compare notes on what you are doing to solve problems of social aggression and bullying. Seek out others in the industry that are ahead of you in this area. Begin drafting a bullying policy that focuses on staff training and education of residents. A task force that focuses exclusively on the company's strategic plan for creating a culture of dignity will put you ahead of the competition. Make bullying and cultural competency education a priority in your organization. All departments must be represented. Bullying is an equal opportunity problem where no one, not even top management, is immune. And a new narrative must be written. Bullying exists across the lifespan. Citizens of all ages need programs. And finally, those who bully need to be seen in the context of a social system that enables them to act out. The bully has to be held accountable. Others in the system do as well, especially those at the pinnacle of the hierarchy. If you'll advance. I have one last story for you. It comes from Diana Benson, who was a service coordinator at an 80-resident HUD housing complex in Ohio. She worked with independent seniors and physically disabled residents and has been working on inventing programming out of necessity in HUD housing. A few years ago, she set out on a mission to improve the spirit in her building, and so I'd like to share her story with you. Having worked in social services for 30 years, Benson has a lot of experience with people. Her first job was at MRDD in Ohio with individuals struggling with both mental and developmental challenges. She then became a geriatric case manager for community mental health and was an executive director of a senior center funded by the United Way prior to her current job. As the point person for people receiving certain services like rideshare programs and other community resources, Benson felt that certain residents were fearful of not getting their needs met. She felt they were being overly aggressive toward one another with the goal of jockeying into position to access scarce services and resources. Benson felt the need to develop her own program out of necessity because she was discouraged with how poorly the residents treated one another. There were various cliques. One group of 7 women was at the top of the social hierarchy. The group would come walking down the hall, and everybody moved out of the way, she reported. Benson confirmed no knowledge of Rosalind Wiseman's book entitled Queen Bees and Wannabes, but called the ringleader of the most problematic group the Queen Bee. She would tell lies about other residents that would make others avoid them. She mocked a person with poor hygiene, would say incredibly mean things, and call people awful names behind their backs. Other residents allowed the behavior, and some joined in by laughing. The effect of this social bullying was damaging for many residents. I had my fill of it, reported Benson. So over two years ago, on her own time at home in the evenings, she went to work on the Internet to figure out how she could change some of the group dynamics. She read the work of Dr. P.M. Forney, F-O-R-N-I, at Johns Hopkins University on civility. She took ideas and information from the Civility Project in Duluth, Minnesota. Benson said, at first, I began plastering kindness quotes on the walls all around the building. People started asking me what I was up to, and I didn't tell them. Once she had gathered enough information from what was already out there about bullying and civility, she developed her own educational program. And she reported not doing any finger pointing and even avoided the truth when people who wondered out loud to her if they were culprits. Benson said it was at least 6 months before she saw any changes. But now, after 2 years, she finally feels there's no longer a serious problem. She reports that the destructive cliques are gone. Other positives came out of Benson's program. She and the residents developed a neighbor-to-neighbor program to solve the fear of not obtaining seemingly scarce resources. It became a barter system where people offered services and then got some of their needs met from others in the building. People now cook meals for one another, provide rides to appointments, or help one another with something they are able to do. It's all about meeting the underlying needs, inclusion, and just being civil to one another, Benson concluded. If you would advance. I've got one last thought for you, and this thought comes from Maya Angelou. Maya said, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. People will never forget how you made them feel. It's the feeling part of all of this that's so important. People can do great things if they know you're behind them, whether they be staff or seniors or families or bullies. I thank you much for participating in this webinar, and if I can answer questions, I'll be glad to.
Wow, Catherine, that was, thank you so much for your research and for everything you've done to pull this together. I don't think I've ever quite seen anything laid out so specifically like this, and I got a lot out of it. I'm going to unmute everybody.
The conference has been unmuted.
Yeah, it did. And see if anybody has any questions. If you would identify yourself, and if you have a question for Catherine, we'll take 2 or 3.
I see one from Crystal Carreras who says, is there such a thing as a community course that is mandatory for residents and staff where all are held accountable for taking the course? I'm sure there likely are. I don't know what they might be in Georgia, but that's the best I can tell you. I'm not aware of any in Georgia. Are you, Walter?
No, not anything that's mandatory. You know, I think what most of our members do with their residents and clients that they serve is just to do education, have education opportunities to create awareness. Of course, there are certain guidelines and many housing communities have house rules that people, have to honor. And so I think education around, what that looks like, because, you can say you have to be nice to somebody, but sometimes you have to tell them what being nice looks like, So I think the education and the awareness is the best opportunity.
And I would think if any of you are establishing your own policies and procedures and your own training program, then those are programs that once implemented could be shared with others, but they have to focus on the behaviors that are expected, the behaviors that aren't tolerated, and most importantly, the consequences for not adhering to those behaviors. Thank you, Amanda.
I like the idea of treating everybody with dignity. Catherine, you mentioned that. And then what does that look like? I think that's one of the things that we miss so often. We throw words out there. You have to be nice. You have to treat people with dignity. But you have to talk about, I think, in the culture of your organization, what does that look like? And I think those are great opportunities and, to create conversation and build community.
Right.
Does anybody have a question that you want to throw out before we end our recording? Okay, well, thank you. I hope that you'll tell your colleagues about the two other webinars that we'll be recording with Catherine. And once again, thanks everybody that called in. And thank you, Catherine, so much for pulling all this information together. It was so clear, and I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Glad to help.